Hello, my name's Olurotimi Osha. I like talking about American presidents. Today I'm going to be talking about Jus Ad Bellum, and that's Latin for justification for going to war or justice in war. Of course, I did earlier videos following the uh, the strikes by U.S. forces as directed by President Trump against Venezuela on January the 3rd, 2026, in which the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife were subsequently kidnapped or rendition brought to the United States, where they're currently facing charges for trafficking in New York. So I've been trying to do an analysis on, uh, you know, uh, the legality of the actions of the United States, and I've gotten into discussing international law. I did an earlier video talking about the United Nations and international law. And of course, I like to go back into history. And so today I'm going to be discussing um, one of the core principles within international law regarding war, and that's Jus Ad Bellum, as I said. So, Jus Ad Bellum, um, it means, justification in war, and that's basically looking for reasons, the right to war, and the principles surrounding, uh, you know, the the justification to go into war. Now, that phrase, Jus ad bellum, again, it's Latin. It was actually founded and coined by Saint Augustine of Hippo. He was a fourth and fifth century Roman Catholic theologian. Interesting, Saint Augustine of Hippo was actually African, right? He was born in Algeria. He always identified as African. Of course, he was a Roman citizen because I've done previous videos discussing the Roman Empire, and of course, the North Africa was part of the Roman Empire at its height. So Saint Augustine of Hippo, even though he was a Roman citizen, but he was an African. And Saint Augustine is the author of City of God, and he's actually considered one of the main proponents of Western philosophy, right? His thinking is actually the foundation of a lot of Western philosophy and Christian thinking, Christian thought. He, again, is the architect, is the founder. He coined that phrase, Jus ad Bellum. And I'm going to be discussing that today. Now, of course, he was a Christian theologian, and so he got a lot of his ideas from expounding, from doing an exegesis of the Bible, right? So he called them Christian exegetes, right? He was analyzing the Bible, and of course, he was a very brilliant theologian, Saint Augustine of Hippo. If you do Western philosophy, you have to study him, and which I did. I took several philosophy courses in Nigeria, and of course, here in the United States at Columbia University, and so we study Saint Augustine of Hippo's thoughts and writings extensively. Of course, again, he was actually African. Um, Now, I'm going to be reading, uh, from the Bible, right? The King James Version, because um, a lot of his ideas and doctrines, which he expounded on, they were from the Bible. So I'm going to first read from First Peter chapter 2, from verse 13, 14. So bear with me. So I want to quickly get that out of the way, and then I'll discuss Jus ad Bellum more extensively. So, so First Peter chapter 2 from verse 13. Submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether it be to the king as supreme, or unto governors as unto them that are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of them that do well, right? For so is the will of God. So that's from the Bible. And so you can easily see if you concerning earlier videos that I did, right? You can see where the theory of divine rights of kings comes from, right? It's right there. You can read it again on your own. I don't want to repeat it. And there's a reason I'm reading. There's a reason I'm reading that, because in the principles of Jus Ad Bellum, one of them, which Saint Augustine propounds, he says that war can only be waged by a proper authority, and by that he meant a sovereign state, or the head of a sovereign state. In that case, a king. Today we don't have, we hardly have kings, so we have a president, right? So President Trump can declare war, right? Depends on our constitution though. But let's see. So now I'm also going to read from Romans 13. That's Romans chapter 13. I'm going to read from verses 3 to 4. I'll read just a little bit of verse 3, a portion of verse 3, because it's rather long. So it goes, that's Romans chapter 13, verse 3. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. Right? And then I'm going to read from verse 4. So that's Romans chapter 13, verse 4. For he is the minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid, for he beareth not the sword in vain, for he is the minister of God to revenge, a revenger, to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. Let me repeat that. Romans 13, verse 4. For he is the minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid, for he beareth not the sword in vain. For he is the minister of God, a revenger, to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. So I'm going to put this aside now, and I'm going to discuss more about Jus Ad Bellum, right? So let me quick. So Saint Augustine of Hippo, he's considered the father of, as I said, he coined the phrase Jus Ad Bellum, and Jus Ad Bellum is the core principle that we use in international law. I took courses in war, peace, and human rights at Oxford University, and one of the principles we learn is Jus Ad Bellum, right? It's something that's enshrined in international law today. And so I was reading from the ideas of its author, and so I wanted to just get it out of the way. So a lot of law during the Dark Ages and medieval period, um, came from the work of theologians, right? Because initially, of course, you remember during the era of the Roman Empire, right? Law came from the emperor, right? So we're talking about Western civilization now, right? So our Western civilization goes back to the Roman Empire, right? Some people say, why don't we go all the way to the Greeks, right? The Romans conquered the Greeks, right? And the Greeks became their teachers. So the Romans absorbed a lot of what the Greeks taught them. So there's no need for us to be going into the Greeks separately. When we go into the Romans, right, the classics, we're absorbing the Greeks, right? We're absorbing what the Greeks taught as well. So I go back to the Roman Empire. So remember, I talked about Augustus. Augustus now started to make law. He created law when he was emperor. Now we fast forward. At some point, the Romans now embraced Christianity and made Christianity the state religion, right? Under Constantine, Emperor Constantine. And since then, the Christian theologians, they now became the state now started to follow religious law, right? Because that's what the monks, the priests, the bishops, that's what they did. They spent their time studying, right? So they did, the monks didn't marry. The priests, they just stayed in their temples, the monasteries, and they would study old laws, and they would think, and they would create concept, dogma, doctrine, and the government, the government would just, they'd follow what they said. So there wasn't a separation of church and state, and this was how Western civilization developed for a long time until the time of the Renaissance, right? So part of what was developed by the Christian theologians was principles, laws regarding war, and Jus Ad Bellum was one of them, and we still use Jus Ad Bellum today. And its architect was Saint Augustine of Hippo, who happened to have been an African who was born in Algeria, right, Numidia. It was a Roman province. It was a Roman citizen, but again, remember, North Africa was actually part of the Roman Empire. Um, so. Um, August, and later on, let me just quickly talk about the movement of Jus Ad Bellum and the principles. So later on, by the time of the Renaissance, so Augustine of Hippo lived between fourth and fifth century A.D. Right, and he did a lot of work concerning Jus Ad Bellum, laws on regarding war. Now, by the time of the Renaissance, there was a famous Dutchman. He was also a theologian and a jurist, a lawyer. Again, remember the early church people, right? The early Christians, church people, the monks, the priests, they, because society, the governments, right, in Europe, in where they used, uh, they framed a lot of their laws from Christian theology and dogma. So a lot of lawyers, a lot of theologians were jurists, were used as jurists and lawyers. So Grotius was a Dutch jurist. He was a Dutch lawyer, and he did a lot of work on. He's actually considered the father of international law, right? Grotius, his name was Hugo Grotius, popularly known in history as Grotius, and he was a lawyer, he was a theologian, and he wrote a very important seminal book called On the Law of War and Peace. And so he expounded on, the concept of Jus Ad Bellum, and he was advocating that, law had to have core elements of proportionality and accountability, right? And that law can be fought, right, to achieve a common good. And so I'm going to go into the core principles, but Augustine of Hippo basically covers these main principles in Jus Ad Bellum, and that's what I'm going to go into. I just wanted to give the evolution of how Jus Ad Bellum, went on the laws concerning justification for war. So the core principles of Jus Ad Bellum include just cause. In Latin, it's called uh, uh, iusta causa. That's just cause. Iusta causa. Uh, so let me quickly name all of them. That's just cause, iusta causa. Um, there has to be. There has to. That's one just cause. There has to also be law should also only be waged as a last resort, right? Then there's the issue, there's proportionality, there's probability of success, right? Probability of success and the proper authority. So those are the five core principles that are expounded on in the doctrine of Jus Ad Bellum, right? That's justification for war. So what is just cause, right? So war should be waged for a just cause, right? You don't. It should be waged for instance, self-aggression. Self-defense. For instance, if a nation their territory has been violated, right? They've disrupted their peace, right? They're foreign invaders, right? And you can declare war to repel the foreign invaders. That's a just cause. Um, yeah, so that's a just cause. So you don't, meaning that there has to be proper intentions, right? Just cause is expounded on by Saint Augustine of Hippo. A reason I read from those verses in the Bible was also, if you notice, there was a lot of issue on divine commands, right? Divine commands that a ruler represents God. So Saint Augustine sort of has this Christian notion of a ruler. a king, a ruler being the lieutenant of God to punish evil and free the good, reward the good, and things like that. Um, so under Saint Augustine's definition of just cause, war can be waged by divine command, as we see in the Bible. That God can ordain somebody to wage war. Because I want to cover all these concepts, I'm not going to expound on them right now or check the boxes. I'm going to do a subsequent video in which I will try to juxtapose these concepts with President Trump's actions and try and check the boxes and also give a historical comparisons. But there's a lot to touch on now, and I was trying to start shortening these videos, right? Just cause. So one of the elements of just cause is divine command. Under Saint Augustine, right? That there's a divine command, and I read that from verses in the Bible. You could see that see those verses in the Bible, and you could check them again from Romans chapter 13, verses 3 and 4. You can also check First Peter. Chapter 2, verses 13 and 14, and you see those divine commands and in there. Now, proper authority is, that a ruler, right, a sovereign state, right? America can declare war, or a king, the president, the leader, President Trump can declare war. But can the CEO of ExxonMobil declare war? No, he's not a proper authority. So according to Jus Ad Bellum, right, he's not a proper authority. Can I go and declare war on Venezuela? No, I cannot. Even though I'm an American citizen, I'm not the leader of America. I have no authority to do that. So only proper authority can declare war. So President Trump's actions can take us to war, right? It will follow the principles of Jus Ad Bellum. So part of and I'm explaining just cause, right? So just cause has to have the proper intentions, right? You can't go and wage war to annex another nation, right? You see that a nation has oil, right? You can't just wage war on them to seize their oil, right? That would not be good intentions, right? It would not meet the criterion for just cause, right? That would be an unethical act, reason to go to war. So it's not proper justification, right? You cannot just wage war to annex territory or to seize another country's goods. Now, if your territory, if your assets, your property, your territory has been wrongly taken, you can wage war to recover it, right? And I'm going to point this out. If you notice, there was a time President Trump was saying he was striking Venezuela in order to recover America's oil that was stolen or something like that, which of course was just pretextual and specious. But you see, so you can wage war. There can be good intentions if your assets, your property have been stolen, a nation's property has been stolen and they want to recover it. So that would be just cause. Um, Now, uh, what else? If you notice, for reasons, actions that shock the conscience, right? Actions that shock the conscience. That would be, an example would be consider the Second World War. If you saw, if a president, a nation observed that Jewish people were being carted off in a concentration camp and they were being exterminated, right? A whole race of people, right? People, because of their religion, they're being persecuted, they're being exterminated, women and children are being killed, right? That's something that shocks the conscience. The Holocaust, that would be just cause to go to war, right? It shocks the conscience. So you're trying to correct an evil, right? You're trying to stop an evil. That's just cause, right? If a leader, a nation observes there's a genocide going on, like it happened during the Second World War, as Nazi Germany carted off um, Jewish people, put them in concentration camps, and started exterminating them, used them as slaves and started exterminating them, right? That's just cause to go to war because it shocks the conscience, right? There's something, so it's a humanitarian crisis, right? That's a humanitarian reason to go to war, right? So America can wage war, would have properly waged war against Germany for that reason, right? So that's a good example of just cause for actions that shock the conscience. Um, so what else? And also to restore peace, right? If our peace has been, there's something, the actions are disrupting, the peace of a nation, right? There's some kind of disruption. So you want to restore peace, right? If another nation is threatening the United States, taking certain actions that are disrupting the peace, then you can actually wage war. That would be just cause. So I think I've pretty much covered, given an idea of what just cause is. So that's just one element of Jus Ad Bellum. Now there's another element in Jus Ad Bellum, proportionality, right? When you go to war, what you're trying to achieve, right? There should be, it should produce greater good than the harms that arise from uh, and devastation that arise as a result of war, right? Waging war and military action, right? So proportionality. Now you can't say that you're going to go to war and use nuclear arms and there'll be a nuclear holocaust and the whole world will be destroyed, right? That's a Pyrrhic victory, right? Victory gained at too great a cost. By the way, Pyrrhic victory is from another concept regarding Rome. It was a general who went to war against the Romans, and he was fighting, and the Romans would fight back. The Romans were known for that. They'd fight you, for centuries, for a long time, years, until they eventually defeat you. Now, this king, Pyrrhus of Ep, Epi. Pyrrhus was his name. He was a king of Epic. I can't remember the name, the state, that he was king of in any event. But yeah, Pyrrhus, and he was known to have said, one more victory like this, right, would be the end of us. So that's a Pyrrhic victory, right? Victory gained at too great a cause. So it's gone into the English lexicon, a Pyrrhic victory. That's victory gained at too great a cost. So proportionality, right? The good clearly outweighs the evil, the harm of going to war. If you're going to go to war and right, there's going to be, so you see, America and the USSR had a Cold War. They never went to war because if USSR and America, the USA had gone to war, there would have been a nuclear holocaust and the whole world would have been destroyed, right? Nothing would have been achieved, right? There would be no proportionality there because America and USSR somehow went to go and, in the arms race, they piled up enough nuclear weapons to be able to destroy the whole world, the whole of mankind, right? What's the purpose of going to war? It would be victory, it would be nonsensical. There'd be no victory there because everybody would be dead. The whole world would be dead, right? Nuclear Armageddon. So no proportionality there. So the good achieved from the war has to outweigh the devastation and the destruction that war is going to cause. And there's got to be probability of success, right? Let me quickly give an example. So America is the strongest power in the world, right? So America is going to kidnap the president, Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela, brought him to America to face trial. Now, uh, Venezuela has a reason to go to war because their territorial integrity has been violated. America just came, kidnapped the president, killed some Venezuelans, right? And so they have a right to revenge a wrongdoing, an injury that it was done to them. You see from what I read in the Bible, and that's what Saint Augustine of Hippo said, that like you can go to war to avenge wrongdoing, something unjust, when an injustice has been done to a state. However, there's got to be Augustine of Hippo, amongst his principles, he states that there's got to be a probability of success, and Grotius also um, expounds on this probability of success. Now, can Venezuela, if they go to declare war on America, would Venezuela win that war? Can Venezuela also send forces to come and retaliate and kidnap President Trump? Is it possible? Do they have the military capacity to do that, to come to invade America? Will they win that war? No, they don't. They have zero probability of success if they do it alone, right? So that's one of the elements of Jus Ad Bellum. Venezuela does not have a chance, right, of defeating the United States in a war, right? But again, some people might point to the Vietnam War, right? The Vietnamese eventually they defeated. America lost that war. We didn't achieve our objective. Vietnam were forced to fight a guerrilla war, and they outdid. They got the upper hand in that war, even though they were the smaller force. They didn't have the military might of America, but there are others backing Vietnam, right? The USSR was backing Vietnam. So that's one of the proxy wars of the Cold War. There are the Chinese, people that were backing North Vietnam, right? We were backing South Vietnam. So America lost that war. Um, right? So, but there's got to be a probability of success. And another reason is, there's got to be the proper authority, right? A sovereign state. Only countries can go to war. Um, Walmart can go to war with ABC, right? ABC Corporation, or can't go to war with Apple, or can't go to war with Alibaba, right? Companies can't go to war with each other. So only sovereign states can go to war. And only a leader of a sovereign state can declare war. For instance, President Trump is the leader of America. He can declare war. But of course, there's another issue of constitutionality. I have other videos in which I address that, because under our constitution, only Congress can declare war. But under Jus Ad Bellum, President Trump is the president, so his actions, he's taking an action. In international law, he's recognized as being able to declare war, instigate war. It doesn't matter if Congress says that, well, he's done something unconstitutional, and it's not yet unconstitutional. Congress can make it unconstitutional through the war powers resolution, or by declaring an act. He still has a few days, right? The law says because of powers he gave the president to act, he has 90 days to take military action, and until Congress can restrain him from acting, right? So there's still plenty. He still has leeway, right? So there are all these loopholes that Congress itself created to allow Congress to act, and I've discussed how the history of that. It's because of our experience with Pearl Harbor and 9/11, right? Congress doesn't want to be responsible for foreign invaders killing Americans on American soil. So Congress sort of creates loopholes and sort of, just dances, skirts around its own power, its authority as being the sole power to wage war. It creates loopholes that allows the president to use military intervention in limited capacity against foreign powers, right? And of course, the other thing is another principle of jus ad bellum is last resort, right? A war should only be waged as a last resort, meaning there should be diplomatic channels, right? Discussions, the alternatives to war, right? There can be economic embargoes, and in this modern era, we do have the United Nations. America is a permanent member in the Security Council, and America could have taken um, it could have taken Nicolas Maduro, whom they've accused of being the leader of a narco terrorist state, or a drug trafficker. They could have taken him to the international criminal courts. Venezuela is actually a signatory of the Rome Statute, which created the International Criminal Court, right, in about 2000. America had initially signed it. President Bill Clinton had signed it, but President Bush withdrew our signature, the United States signature. So, but Venezuela, right, is a signatory, right? And they are bound by the International Criminal Court. So President Trump could have taken him to International Criminal Court. The International Criminal Court actually it's prosecutes individuals for war crimes and other things, other crimes, leaders of states, government officials. So that was an alternative. There's also the International Court of Justice. I'm going to have to do another video discussing these. So these are international bodies. They have an affiliation with the United Nations, and America was very significant in creating these. They're cornerstones. They're major elements of international law, right? So there are alternatives. So in International Court of Justice, it's a state, a sovereign state that can be taken, and there's a means of resolving disputes between states. So America could have taken um, Venezuela to the International Court of Justice. So that wasn't explored. So there's last resort is an issue. So I think I've pretty much touched on it all. Uh, uh, Justa causa, that's just cause. I've explained that. There's the issue of proportionality. I've talked about that. Probability of success, I've discussed that. And probability of success and the proper authority, right? Only sovereign states can declare war, or the rule of a sovereign state. I've discussed that. What's the fifth element? Last resort. And that was what I was saying, that there's got to be war can only be as a last resort. So I'm going to do a subsequent video and see if all the boxes were checked, right? If all the boxes were properly checked in the principle of and the doctrine of Jus Ad Bellum, which is justification for war or right of war. And because wars are not supposed to be waged because of cruelty or for inappropriate, nefarious reasons, right? Because one state, a more powerful state, wants to steal the property or territory of another state, right? That cannot happen, right? That wouldn't be just cause. So I'm going to do a subsequent video, and then I'll properly analyze. I'll do a juxtaposition and compare the actions that were taken by President Trump and the United States regarding the military intervention and the kidnapping of Nicolas Maduro. It's interesting that I was just pointing out how the basis of Jus Ad Bellum is in Christian doctrine, right? And one of them, I read out the ideals of waging war. That sometimes, the Christian doctrine says sometimes, war is necessary and appropriate to punish evildoers and to protect the good. So, for instance, this was a justification during the Crusades of the Dark Ages, right? English kings like Richard the Lionheart, they would go to war in Jerusalem. They do all these crusades to try and punish what they conceived as evil and protect Christians, right? Protect Christian territories. I mentioned in an earlier video the Knights Templars, which were actually an order of priests, right? They were Christian soldiers. They're priests who were soldiers, and they took vows of poverty, but they said they were fighting wars against evil, not just evil men, protecting Christianity and Christian territories. And of course, they also protected the routes for pilgrimage, because Christians used to take pilgrimage to Jerusalem back then. So you see, those are concepts that come out from Jus Ad Bellum, right? And if you notice, when President Trump actually struck Nigeria on December 25, he was actually rehashing the concept of, right? He seemed to be invoking the concept of Jus Ad Bellum regarding protecting Christians, right, against evil. So he said he was doing it to protect Christians in Nigeria who were being killed by terrorists, right? So it appears there might be someone who's a Christian fanatic, right? Going back to dark ages of Christian doctrine, right? Advising President Trump in the White House. So I'm going to do a subsequent video and I'll expound on these concepts of Jus Ad Bellum. My name is Olurotimi Osha. I like talking about American presidents, and I draw attention also to color of law violations, pivoting on subordination of perjury and fraud on the court, which I've been experiencing in Montgomery County, Maryland, since May 16, 2023, when I was kidnapped from my home based on false allegations, and then trumped up charges were filed against me. I'm a law abiding American citizen. As of May 16, 2023, I was an auditor in the Department of the Navy, and I had reported misconduct and fraud on the court. Misconduct and fraud in the Department of the Navy to the appropriate authorities. I was subsequently framed by Montgomery County Police and a deranged man called Jide Iwarere, a Howard University professor. He fabricated an emergency evaluation petition. I'm a healthy, salubrious adult. I have no history of mental illness. I have no mental illness. Doctors have confirmed that I have no mental illness. My family have said I have no mental illness. None of my friends has seen it till today. It's 3 years, but the trumped up charges against me still exist. Judge James Bonifant is a corrupt judge and a racist and xenophobic judge in Montgomery County, Maryland. He might be suffering severe mental illness. He committed fraud on the courts by committing me wrongfully to do an incompetency to stand trial, right, based on a false incompetency to stand trial order. His objective was, of course, to coerce me to accept a plea bargain and to also obstruct justice in proceedings, investigations that were going on in the federal government, because that was the effect. That was what happened. So these trumped up charges have been filed against me. Judge James Bonifant has violated my rights to a speedy trial. It's been 3 years now. He also violated my 14th Amendment rights by taking my job. I had a new job offer at the Department of Defense at the Pentagon, a 6-figure job. Judge James Bonifant said he wanted me to lose my job, right? And he was delusional in his statement, so he violated my constitutional rights. It's astonishing that, we see the criminality, the criminal conduct, the nexus between judicial misconduct, prosecutorial misconduct, and police misconduct in Montgomery County, Maryland, and how they are co-opted to violate Whistleblower Protection Act in the Department of Defense and Department of Navy. So from my experience, I'm seeing that there is corruption in high places in the Department of Defense and Department of the Navy. I've reported to the FBI and the Department of Justice. I survived an apparent assassination attempt, right? Or, an attempt to make me fear an assassination attempt. All of these still violate my constitutional rights, and they are unjust actions. They impugn the integrity of the United States government, and they desecrate our American values. I'm seeking justice, and I'll keep you posted. Thank you.